As the chamber fell into silence, the weight of the Varen elder's words seemed to hang in the air like a looming shadow. Many of the representatives had lived through countless wars, their species having conquered worlds, crushed rebellions, and maintained peace through brutal efficiency. Yet, there was something unsettling in the way the elder spoke of the humans. Not as equals in combat, nor as simple adversaries, but as a force of nature, unpredictable, uncontrollable, and relentless. Across the table, Rull of the Ursh fidgeted uneasily, his elongated fingers tapping the smooth surface in rhythm. Despite his earlier bravado, he couldn't shake the unease the elder's words had stirred in him. Amphibious by nature, the Ursh were not accustomed to direct conflict, preferring to manipulate events from behind the scenes. Their aquatic world, rich in resources, had remained largely untouched by the galactic conflicts that ravaged other systems. They had always relied on their diplomacy and cunning to navigate intergalactic politics. But the mention of humans provoked a primal sense of fear within him that he could not explain. Elder, Rull began cautiously, his voice carrying the soft cadence of his species. If what you say is true, then why haven't they expanded further? If these humans are as dangerous as you claim, why do they remain isolated in their small corner of the galaxy? Surely they would have seized more by now. The Varen elder closed his eyes for a moment, as if the weight of his answer was too much to bear. He exhaled slowly, then opened them, fixing Rull with a steady gaze. "They are not like us," the elder said, his voice tinged with a deep sadness. "They do not seek to conquer for the sake of empire, as we do. They do not hunger for power or territory in the way we understand. For humans, it is personal. When they fight, it is not for resources, but for survival of their people, their way of life, their beliefs. And when they are provoked, they are like an organism that adapts, grows stronger, and learns from each defeat. It is not in their nature to expand recklessly, but when you cross them, when you threaten what is theirs, they do not stop until you are utterly destroyed." Rull shifted uncomfortably, but before he could respond, Torrens stood, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the chamber. His patience, already thin, had evaporated completely. "Enough," Torrens' voice thundered, the room's acoustics amplifying his words. His hand clenched into a fist as he addressed the council, his eyes blazing with fury. "We are wasting time debating these myths. We have analyzed the humans' technology, their tactics. Yes, they are persistent, but persistence is not enough. Our fleets are stronger, our weapons superior. We will raid their outposts, take what we need, and be done with them. They cannot stand against the might of the Rollock." There was a murmuring of agreement from some of the other council members. For many of them, this was just another problem to be solved, another species to be managed. The galaxy had seen countless wars before, and humans were, after all, just another player in the grand game. The Varen elder, however, remained unmoved. He had seen arrogance like this before, in other wars in other species, and he knew where it led. "Torren," the elder said softly, his voice cutting through the murmur like a knife. "Have you ever wondered why no species occupies the human homeworld? Why, in all the cycles of galactic conflict, no one has ever successfully taken Earth?" Torren's sneer faltered, but only for a moment. "It's a backwater planet," he said dismissively. "It has no strategic value. Why waste resources on it?" The elder's eyes narrowed. That's what the Krells thought too. A century ago they made the same mistake. They believed Earth to be insignificant, and they sent a fleet to subdue the humans. Torren's face darkened. The Krells were a cautionary tale in galactic history, a once mighty species whose very existence had been erased. But the details of their demise were shrouded in mystery, dismissed by many as a legend, an exaggerated warning to young species about the dangers of overreach. "They tried to take Earth," the elder continued, his voice growing heavier with each word. "And the humans wiped them from existence. Not just their fleet, not just their outposts, their entire species." A heavy silence followed, the gravity of the elder's words sinking in. The chamber, usually filled with heated debate and posturing, was now frozen in stunned disbelief. The Krells were a powerful species, Rull said, his voice barely above a whisper. Oh, how could the humans do such a thing? They didn't do it alone, the elder replied. When the humans fight, they are never truly alone. They adapt, they form alliances, and they use every resource available to them. The Krells underestimated the humans, and it cost them everything. For the first time, a hint of doubt crossed Torrens' face. But his pride refused to let him back down. He turned to the other council members, his voice filled with defiance. We are not the Krells, Torren growled. We are the Ralak. We will not make the same mistakes. The elder's gaze remained steady, his voice now barely above a whisper. No. You are making new ones. Far from the deliberations of the council, in the cold, unforgiving void of space, the Ralak fleet moved silently through the blackness, their ships sleek and deadly, designed for swift, brutal strikes. Torren stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching the stars blur past as they approached the human outpost. The plan was simple. A lightning-fast raid, in and out before the humans had time to react. They had analyzed the outpost's defenses. Light, barely enough to defend against a minor skirmish. Torren felt a surge of confidence. The Varen Elder's warnings had unsettled him briefly. But now, with the vastness of space around him and the strength of the Ralak fleet at his command, he was sure of victory. Status! Torren barked, his deep voice echoing across the bridge. All systems green, one of his officers replied, their fingers flying across the control panel. No human patrols detected. Torren smirked, leaning back in his command chair. Overconfident, he muttered to himself. Typical. On the tactical display, the outpost appeared as a small, isolated station, barely a blip on the vast expanse of space. It hung there like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. Prepare for assault, Torren ordered. We take the station, secure the technology, and return home. Quick and clean. The Ralak fleet moved with precision, their ships slipping through the human outpost's minimal defenses with ease. Explosions rippled along the outer hull of the station as the Ralak soldiers breached the walls, pouring into the corridors like a flood of locusts. Inside the station, human soldiers were few and far between. Most were caught off guard, barely able to raise their weapons before being cut down by the ruthless Ralak attackers. It was almost too easy. Torren led the charge, his pulse steady as he approached the station's command center. The doors slid open with a hiss, revealing the outpost's commander, a human man standing alone. His uniform singed from the nearby explosions, blood trickling down his temple. In his hand, he held a sidearm, though he made no move to raise it. You don't know what you've done, the human commander said, his voice calm despite the chaos erupting around him. Torren sneered, raising his plasma rifle. I know exactly what I've done, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. You're defeated. The human commander smiled, a strange, unsettling grin that made the hairs on the back of Torren's neck stand on end. You think this is over, the commander said, his voice quiet, but it's just beginning. Before Torren could process the meaning behind the words, he pulled the trigger. The human crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Torren turned to his soldiers. Secure the data. We're done here. As the Ralak soldiers began extracting the stolen human technology, a strange unease crept into Torren's mind. Something about the human commander's final words lingered, gnawing at him. But he shook it off. The raid had been a success. The humans had been caught off guard, their defenses overwhelmed, and now the Ralak would return home with the spoils of war. But just as the Ralak soldiers were finishing the extraction, an alarm blared throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and a deep mechanical voice echoed through the halls. Alert! Human vessels approaching. Torren's eyes narrowed as he turned to the tactical display. Dozens of human ships had appeared on the radar, emerging from hyperspace with terrifying speed. It was as if they had been waiting, watching. As the human fleet descended upon the Ralak forces, the space around the outpost erupted into chaos. Human warships, sleek and agile, moved with deadly precision, cutting through the Rollick fleet like a blade through flesh. Torrens' ship shook violently as the first volley of human firepower struck. He gripped the armrests of his command chair, his eyes wide with disbelief. Where did they come from? One of his officers shouted, panic rising in their voice. Torrens' mind raced. How had the humans known? How had they responded so quickly? Didn't make sense. None of it made sense. They were waiting for us, Torren realized. His voice barely a whisper. They knew we were coming. The Rollick fleet, caught off guard and outmaneuvered, was falling apart. Ship after ship was destroyed, their wreckage scattering across the void like so much debris. The humans, far from the disorganized rabble Torren had expected, moved with precision and coordination that rivaled even the Rollick's famed tactics. On the bridge of his ship, Torren watched helplessly as the tide of battle turned. His forces, once so confident, were now being obliterated. "We have to retreat," one of his officers yelled, panic evident in their voice. "No," Torren roared, slamming his fist on the control panel. "We fight. We're Rollick." But even as he spoke the words, he knew it was over. The humans had come not just to defend their outpost, but to annihilate their enemies. This was not a mere skirmish, it was a message.